Well, first of all, it's been a very, very hot week, that is for sure. I think a lot of places are encountering this sort of humidity and heat. We've tried to
Recording
adapt
in progress.
accordingly. The guys are in a very good place, they're very confident, as you might imagine, after such a useful and productive week last week. But as you say, this is our first venture into Canada. I'm sure the Canadian teams are delighted to get themselves back home and get in front of their own fans. So I expect we'll see a very different group to the one that we met not so long ago down here, and obviously one in the very late stages of the game. But tough. It's going to be a difficult trip, a difficult week, and it starts off with a very talented and difficult group that we play against.
I appreciate you, Coach. We will now kick it off with questions from the media. We'll start with Tim Sullivan.
Gary, you've had a few guys out of the lineup, including Walker and Anibal, who are injured on international duty. Jack Mayer and Dan Lovett's unavailable the last couple games. When are you expecting those four guys back?
Lovett's and Jack Mayer are now back in training and ready to go, which is really good news. Annabelle is very, very close. It'll be a last-minute decision. He's progressed extremely well and has been involved in pretty much everything up to now. So I'm really pleased about that. And Walker will be out. He's still trying to nurse his way through this hamstring, although he's making good progress.
We'll continue with Ray Hills.
Gary, of course, going back to yesterday's news following Dambaji, he's someone who, with his team, has battled back multiple times from whether his own injuries or competition in the squad. I'm curious to know, in terms of the club's decision to send him to Colorado, what exactly led to that idea coming up after him being with the club, since the beginning of its MLS tenure?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward one, really, Drake. We've had additions along the way. The group's got stronger. We have multiple bodies in that area that are fighting for limited minutes, and this wasn't a case of disliking Dominic or not necessarily feeling as warm and fuzzy about him as we have before. It's just a matter of business and an improvement. And it was always going to be difficult for him or even some of the guys that are still here to break into the group with the type of individuals that we have. And it ended up being a good deal at the right time for all parties concerned, I do believe. But I think the dynamics outside of the playing are better off sort of fed into Mike. From a purely playing standpoint, it's about competition.
Thank you, Coach. Please, to any media member who has any other questions or any follow-ups, alert me through the chat. Otherwise, we will let you go. But it sounds like Dre Hills has a follow-up.
Yeah, Gary, going into Sunday, as you mentioned in your opening statement, this is the first time going up north, at least for this group. But of course, in your experience, you've gone up to Toronto before. I'm curious to know what some of the differences in terms of preparation and logistics for getting the guys ready to compete, especially at this time of year where games are going to be coming, as you say, thick and fast. What exactly does come into a game like Sunday?
Well, I'm trying to actually think back to my last venture into Canada and certainly to BMO. And it took me back to 2010 where obviously I had a very successful night in Toronto. So my experiences of being in Toronto itself are very good. In terms of changes to logistics or to challenges, the border always presents a slightly different dynamic to get players through, and the timing of that and the difficulties that are attached to it. But what I do hope is that in terms of climate, we're going that much further north. I'm hoping that we're going to leave the extreme humidity and heat that we have here at the moment behind us to a degree, and we're into much more comfortable climes, if you like. So, whilst there's all of the usual challenges of facing a team at home, and especially as talented a team as Toronto are, they're going to have their Canadian guys back. I would think they'll be close to full strength. They're on a decent run. This current spell that they're in has seen them, bag the best run and best amount of points haul in a good period for them. And I'm sure that that talented group are starting to find their way again. And it's no shock that they found themselves in this run as they return back home. I can only imagine what it must have been like for all of those Canadian teams to be away from home as long as they have been. But in terms of our challenge, we now have to go to their home field and try and produce a performance that can put points on the board. And I've no doubt that we're capable of that, but it gets that much harder, of course, because of the way that the schedule has changed again.
Thank you, Coach. We'll continue with a question from Ben Wright.
Yeah, Gary, last time on the road, we saw maybe the best defensive performance of the year against Columbus. And overall, recently, the defense has been playing at a pretty high level. How do you balance on the road kind of keeping that defensive solidity as well as mixing in some of the attack that we've seen more at home?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's trying to get the right players on the field to do a particular job at any given moment. So, we've seen at home that the trio of Hanny and Randall and CJ have been very, very exciting. But we've got other players in this group, and most notably, of course, the newest addition in Akeloba. Ake's coming on terrifically well. He's looked absolutely stunning in training, and it's now my job to try and get that balance right and get the right moments to integrate him in the group and with the right players around him. So I do believe we've got as good an attacking group as we've had in the 18 months that I've been here in MLS. And to get that right balance now, the right amount of minutes, sharp, fresh forwards, players that are looking to make a bit of a name for themselves, or to get the very best out of themselves now that there's that much more competition in that front line. But wrapped around that, of course, we've still got to make sure that we've got a good balance and a good foundation to the group. And whilst it's been something that we almost take for granted at times, there's no doubt about it. There's a mentality and a focus that's needed, especially in a fixture as this one. We expect to maybe forsake the ball a bit more than usual against a very capable team. But we've also got 3 tough games in a week, and I've got to make sure that I get the right group out at the right time.
We have time for one more question for Coach, and it will be from Tim Sullivan.
Gary, you mentioned the recent run of results, but what have you seen maybe change stylistically since Javier took over for Chris?
I have to say, probably not an awful lot. I would think a lot of things that have gone on, and I've seen it multiple times before, teams get into a difficult run, almost a rut that they're incapable of finding their way out of. And in many ways, it's the strangest of things that can sometimes lift what looks almost like a spell over the team, a dark cloud that is just not leaving. And that's not me being critical of Chris Armas or anyone else that's been there. It's just the fact that it's change. It's a different voice. It's a different personality. Having been in that position myself, you walk into the locker room as a new coach or with a new challenge, with an energy and an invigoration that the players latch onto. And I've also been in a changing room and a locker room where things are not going well, and that lack of energy and that negativity can sometimes emanate towards the team without even knowing. And it's just a consequence of the sport and the way that it shifts and move that we're in. And I do think going home, being back at BMO, being back at home generally with their family, they pick up a couple of results from the stats last week. Life wasn't easy in Chicago, but the difference is they've come away with a result and a win, which will have been terrific for their confidence. And it can be those small differences that really start to kickstart a team's season and their belief again in what they can achieve. And there's no doubt about it. This is as talented a group as any in MLS. History tells us that, with as many final appearances and a championship under their belt, this group's more than capable. They've got quality in all areas of the field, and it really is just a matter of time for them. And maybe this is their time where they're getting into a rhythm again. But, our job's going to be to obviously stick a little bit of a pin in that and come out of there with some points on the board.
I mean, recovery is enormous. I mean, the tough one's definitely going to be the 2 road games coming up. The Sunday, Wednesday is never easy, just having those 2 days in between, just doing everything you can. Hydrating-wise, recovery boots-wise, treatment-wise, rest-wise, sleep-wise, to just make sure you can be as close to 100% for that Wednesday game, even though it's pretty near impossible. You're always going to start kind of feeling it in like 60th minute onwards. And then just a rotation of bodies throughout the team. As many guys as we can get minutes on Sunday and Wednesday kind of switching out, then the fresher we're going to be, and we're going to look a lot more lively than the team we play on Wednesday.
Thank you, Dave. We'll now open the floor for questions. A reminder to the media to please alert me through the chat as soon as possible if you have a question for Dave. We will kick it off with Tim Sullivan.
Dave, obviously a big part of it is worry about doing your own job. But when you have so many new bodies around you, with some of the guys gone for international tournaments or injury, what sort of responsibility do you have to take on with maybe an inexperienced guy like Taylor or Jack? Obviously, you've had Jaleel and Dax in there a little bit too, but what kind of responsibility do you have to take on leadership-wise in that situation?
I mean, just prior to the game, reaffirming them how good of players they are. I mean, they're in this league for a reason. They're being called upon for a reason. They're really good players, and just having that confidence to go out there. And once you get past the first 5-10 minutes, it's just like any other soccer game you've played. You kind of calm down, the nerves go, and you're just out there playing soccer. And then just constantly talking throughout the game, communication-wise, making sure they're in good spots, making sure they're not tuning out mentally, stuff like that. And they've both stepped in and done an extremely good job since they've been called upon these last few games and few weeks when we've had guys missing through COVID or Gold Cup or injury or just normal game congestion. So as much as those guys can step up and do well, it helps the team so much. And we've picked up a lot of very important points in these last few weeks. So I think everyone's kind of done their job and stepped up when we needed them.
We just do our best, to recover every time we play a game, and mentally as well. We've had some success with our last 3 games, and I think we're just trying to put all of that behind us and focus on this stretch of away games, because we're going to have a difficult week ahead of us.
Thank you, Brian. We will now kick it off for questions from the media. We'll start with Tim Sullivan.
Yeah, Brian, how do you guys handle, especially after being at home for such a large proportion of the season so far, kind of this longer road trip? What do you guys kind of have to do to prepare mentally and maybe even physically for it?
Yeah, I mean, now that we have to go back to, playing in Canada as well, I mean, it's a different mindset. We haven't done that in a while. Like going to another country, getting everything right to be able to travel. I mean, we're doing our best to on and off the field to get ready to prepare for these games, especially in Toronto, which is the first game. I think the team is in a good place, in a good spirit, good confidence. We're just doing our best to be able to go into Toronto and get some results.